Welcome to Innovations in Education. I'm your host, David Adams, CEO of the Urban Assembly. And on this show, we bring guests every single episode who have made things work in public education. This show is about the innovators. This show is about the folks who are solving problems. This show is about making things work in education. Now, there's a lot of shows out there talking about what's wrong in the education systems, and those are great shows. There's some shows talking about what we're not doing well, and there's a lot to learn from those, but that's not this show. This show is going to be featuring educators who are making things work for young people and improving public education. I'm here with Superintendent Gary Beidleman, and he is a transformative district leader with a distinguished career spanning over 2 decades in education. As a high school superintendent with New York City Public Schools, Gary, you bring a wealth of experience and expertise in empowering students, educators, and school leaders to design and deliver meaningful and relevant learning experiences. You've been at the forefront of leading teams and initiatives aimed at addressing complex challenges within urban school systems. Superintendent Gary Beidleman, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Really happy to be here. Was looking forward to this conversation.
Well, I'm excited to have you here as well, Gary. Now, in your bio, they talk about this idea of a superintendent of Manhattan high schools. Across the country, that may seem unfamiliar to folks just to have a superintendent of high schools. What is that position and what does it mean in terms of your roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, great question, David. It's something that I kind of have to explain when I'm having conversations with friends from across the country who are in similar roles. And they're like, okay, explain the leadership structure in New York City to me. So, we have our chancellor, Melissa Avelis Ramos, is current chancellor, and she has her deputy chancellors. And one of the deputy chancellors is in charge of division of school leadership, Dr. Donica Rux. And Dr. Rux has 45 superintendents, 30 of them, I believe we have 30 school districts, community school districts, which are traditionally the K-8 districts. Many of those have a high school or a few high schools. And then we have our high school superintendents. So there are 2 high school superintendents in the Bronx, 2 high school superintendents in Queens, 2 in Brooklyn. And in terms of Manhattan,
They only need one. Huh?
you only need one. I feel like with Manhattan high schools, right now I have a portfolio. There are 100 high schools on the island, but my portfolio is 46 high schools, 32,000 students. And our Manhattan high school students come from all over the city. From Staten Island, from Queens, from Brooklyn, from the Bronx. Before I took this position, I was a middle school principal in the Bronx. So I love going into our high schools, Stuyvesant, LaGuardia, High School for Fashion Industries, Manhattan Center, Ruge Early College, and walk in and a kid will come up to me and they'll be like, hey, Gary, you were my principal. Or they'll like kind of hide behind their current high school principal and say, I think I know him. I think he was my principal when I was in high school. And when I was in middle school, and I'm like, yeah, I know who you are. I'll call the kid out by name, give him a hug, take a picture with them, send it to the former assistant principals. For me, I want Manhattan high schools to be about community. And we service students from all over the city. So it's great that we can create this sense of community and familiarity within the Manhattan high schools district with, this large number of students that we service across a humongous geographic area.
Now, Gary, I don't think people really appreciate the size of New York City public schools. I heard you say 32,000 students across all 5 boroughs and over 100 high schools all fall under your responsibilities. Did I get that right?
Yes, we have a huge portfolio. We get a great assist from our superintendents who are citywide. So there are 3 citywide high school superintendents. One of those works directly with you, Fred Walsh with Urban Assembly. And so they'll pick up, a number of the schools, but the responsibility, is really on us and the team here at Manhattan High Schools.
So I assume you've got a 7-day-a-week work schedule, a 37-hour day, because things happen all over the city all the time. Did I get that right? 37 hours?
30, man, it's a 48-hour-a-day job, whether it's emails coming in, situations at different schools that we need to address, ensuring we have the right team members addressing problems when something comes to the attention of central office, working with the principal, making them aware, letting them know these things are happening outside of teaching and learning, right? Outside of your school building that are going to directly impact your school. And so ensuring that we work with principals and that they're ready and that they feel that they have someone there, that they feel supported. And I'm able to provide that leadership coaching. The superintendency just isn't about teaching and learning,
Mm.
really helping principals find new solutions to old existing problems that have been pervasive and persistent in urban education, nationwide, really globally for many years. And how are we looking at new solutions to these old problems? And so coaching principals in that way and ensuring that they're positioned for success.
Well, let's hold on to this idea about principalship. I heard you say you were a principal in the Bronx. Did you go straight from the principalship to the superintendent of Manhattan schools? What was your path to this position that you have here, Gary?
Every year I have a great graduation speech. So when I show up at high school graduation, they're like, oh, the superintendent's going to say a couple words. I always put something together in my head. 2 years ago, I talked about success, and we view success as being here, right? It's kind of this linear thing. And you start college, high school, college, and you move forward. And this is what I want to be when I grow up. And, you get all the experience you need and you become that. Success for me is kind of this.
Yeah.
It's a very squiggly line, almost a gyre, where, it just kind of goes in circles, things come around. I started off, originally, fresh out of high school, I worked for a program, Leadership, Education, Athletics, and Partnership in New Haven, Connecticut. My mentors worked with Susan Wright Edelman at Children's Defense Fund, and they were organizing the Stand for Children. And I was a
Oh, I
student.
know Stand for Children. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was a student at Clark Atlanta University, and he was organizing in New Haven. And he said, hey, you're about to graduate. They need someone to work this program or project director. Why don't you come up, interview? Really loved the organization, worked there for a year, but I wanted to move back south. Coming from Atlanta to New Haven was a big jump. I wanted to get further south. So I sent my resume out in the DC area to private school, and the Black Student Fund, which had been around since 1965 in Washington, DC, sent the resume there. And Gwen Thompson, the wife of the late great Coach John Thompson, was director of the organization, picked up my resume, called me down for an interview. And I'm interviewing, I'm talking, and I was like, well, in order to teach English and blah, blah. She's like, well, I really don't want you to teach English. I want you to come work with me. I want you to come here and work. And so I was like, oh, wow. And the mission and vision of that organization clearly aligned to my beliefs. It was around equity. How do we, provide pathways for students of color, particularly Black students, admission to private and independent schools in the DC metropolitan area. So Washington, DC, Virginia, Maryland. And it wasn't just about admission, but retention, right? So the student, I remember one of my students who was at Sidwell Friend School, in the high school at Sidwell Friend, and a classmate was having a birthday party. And so Ms. Thompson said, okay, I need you to take the student shopping, something to wear for the party. So she has a gift to take. Make sure they have a car, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, why are we doing all this, Ms. Thompson? She says, because her experience at this school has to be like every other student's experience.
I see.
And that really stuck with me, and it shaped my view of education moving forward. After that, I did some community organizing in the DC area.
No kidding.
Then I started to teach. I taught high school English, and in my talented and gifted high school English class, it was 11th grade. And a student, a feast said, Mr. Beidleman, you go hard. Why are you even here? You should be teaching at some private school somewhere. And I just paused and I said, a feast, aren't you as worthy of this quality of education that I'm trying to provide for you as a student whose family is paying $50,000+ a year?
Yes.
And I heard at the same time, 30, 35 kids in class all go, oh, right? They didn't feel they deserved that quality of education. But because of my experience, I believe every student, regardless of who they are, how they come to the table, like they deserve it.
That's right.
After that, I moved to New York City. When I came to New York City, I worked at the Harlem Community Justice Center.
Wow.
Lexington and 121st.
I know it. Yeah.
And I ran the Harlem Youth Court. And so I ran mentoring programs for the youth court. We had our young people would hold trials for low-level offenders, students will receive a YB card, youth delinquency card. We had, trained students to be prosecutor, a student to be the defendant for the person who was kind of up for the crime. And then we had a jury and a judge. And the students would levy penalties like tutoring. You must come to after school tutoring, community service. You must interact with a mentor. So we would provide mentors. We create community service opportunities. Awesome program, but I missed teaching. I really missed the classroom. So I went down to 65 Court Street and
65 Court.
And this was 2003. Mayor Bloomberg, Joe Klein were really just getting in and kind of uncovering a lot of the inefficiencies that we were seeing and trying to improve the system as a whole. I walked into 65 Court. I saw that line of folks. I was like, oh my goodness. I honestly said this, David. I said, I could really do anything I want in this school system because I know I'm organized, I'm driven, I believe in students. And what I saw at that time, you don't see that anymore. It has changed dramatically over the past 22 years for the benefit of students, for the benefit of families, and for the benefit of educators. It's changed tremendously. And so I interviewed, it was a group interview, and I talked about being an English teacher and 4 years of experience and high school English. I believe, you need to use text that students can really relate to, that represents their identities, their ethnicity, their religious beliefs, their cultural beliefs, where they're from, who they are. And the panel just looked at me like, and they said, well, we really don't do that here, right?
Wow.
And so one of the members of the panel, Sharif Rucker, we were later teachers together, principals together, comes outside as I'm leaving. And he said, hey, they ain't like you at all.
That's what they said.
He said, but my principal would love you.
Wow.
He was like, I'm going to call Mr. Mickens at Boys and Girls High School. He's like, the only thing I need you to do, go put on a tie before you go over there.
Fair enough.
So I went home, put on the tie, went to see Mr. Mickens, and we just had a great conversation about students. And there were about 20 folks in the room as he's, asking me a couple of questions for the interview. And it just felt very comfortable to me. Felt very comfortable. And so I started teaching English at Boys and Girls. I floated. I was a new teacher, big building, a lot of veteran teachers. And so I started on the second floor, second period. And then I was on the third floor, third period. And I was late to my third period class every day. All the students were late. I was late. Just couldn't get through the hallway. We had over 4,500 students in the building. Wow.
This is pre-small schools. Yeah, Boys and Girls was
small schools, right? Yeah. This is fall 2003.
Mm-hmm.
This is, as the small school movement is about to take off. And so after Christmas break, after that holiday, December holiday break, I'm really able to get to my room on time. My students are on time. Like there are no problems, no issues. And I asked one of my colleagues, it seems like the hallways are pretty empty. Where are all the students? And they said, oh, don't worry. We lose a number of students during the holiday break.
Yeah.
Don't worry. They'll be back in the fall. And that just didn't sit well with me.
Yeah.
For me, it was really like, where are these students? Where'd they go? What are they doing? Are they okay? And so that spring, the applications for New Leaders to New Schools opened up. And I think it was around this time. It was like February 2004. It was the same time, the Super Bowl with Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake. I missed the whole halftime show because I'm like banging away on this application.
Gotcha.
And I submitted my application, and then I got a call from New Leaders for New Schools. And I went in, I interviewed. You always know you're in the right place when you see familiar faces. And there were a couple of familiar faces.
That's like me and you. We hang out sometimes, right?
Right. Familiar face. That when you see a familiar face,
yeah,
I know I'm in the right place because this person is here.
Yeah.
And I saw a couple of familiar faces and interviewed. And what I would find out many, many, many years later, a couple of retired principals from around the country, I think one was from this area, one was from DC, they told the interviewing team, they said, if we don't hire him, it is a disservice. And what are we doing as a program?
Wow.
Like, we don't admit him. Like, they told me this years later, while I was a principal and finding, a small level of success.
Yeah.
We're going to tell you something. That day you interviewed, there were people who you didn't meet the rubric. right? We had this rubric, and you didn't meet the rubric, but we saw something and we heard something that we knew was necessary for this program and for kids.
Wow.
They told me this years later, and my heart was just full. When they told me that, my heart was just full. So I got into New Leagues for New Schools, partnered with Institute for Student Achievement, started a new small school in Bed-Stuy.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of success. I got a call one year from Kathleen Nelvin, retired principal. She was working at New Leader. And she said, Gary, we just need some help understanding something. She said, you had the highest graduation percentage for boys of color in school level 1 and level 2. How are you doing it? And I said, I don't know. I was like, we're just doing it.
Right.
And what that caused me to do was really reflect on the systems and structures we had in place so that students, number one, they build confidence. I don't care what grade you get in 9th grade. I don't care how many credits you get. I don't care about any of that stuff in 9th grade. I want you to feel good about school. I'm trying to undo years of trauma that you may have experienced as a student who's housing compromised, a student who's economically disadvantaged, a student of color, an English language learner, a student with disability. I am trying to address any of the trauma you may have experienced being the smartest kid in the room. I'm trying to undo having dyslexia. I'm trying to undo any of that trauma you experienced K to 8 in 9th grade. And at the same time, on the parallel track, accelerating students who come in ready to take off. Then also putting together heterogeneous groupings so that you can see as a student who may have come in level 1, level 2, and not really taking school seriously, I can see a kid that looks just like me, sounds just like me, talks, walks, lives down the street from me. Hey, how are you getting straight A's? It's a lot of good questions in class. Let me see how I can do that, right? So I always believed in the heterogeneous groupings. So did that, had a lot of success, took students on college tours. A story I told recently, we had a student who had an ankle monitor and called probation. I was like, hey, I want to take this kid on the college tour. Probation officer laughed. He was like, no, really, what's up? And I was like, I want to take this kid to DC. Is it okay if I take him out the state? Put me on speakerphone, said, say it again. I want them to hear. Said it again. The whole room laughs.
Wow.
Notorious.
Yeah.
Everyone knew him, but didn't know him for the right reasons.
Okay.
I knew what he was capable of, but I knew who that kid wanted to be. I knew he was really trying to be something different. For him to be something different, I had to interact with him differently. I had to show him something different. I had to not make him the pariah, the outsider, but bring him into the fold. Had a successful trip, an amazing trip. Student was no different than any other of the young people that we had on that experience. So it was that building confidence in 9th grade, 10th grade, really giving students opportunity to ensure they have the credits they need and to put them on the track toward graduation. So 10th grade, a lot of credit recovery programs, after school programs, Saturday school, Regents Prep. George Leonard used to do the 9 to 9 Regents Prep. So in 9 a.m., they leave 9 p.m. on the Saturday, right? You have them all day. I didn't have the stamina for 9 to 9. So we would do like a 9 to 1. But we have students in on Saturday, every Saturday, feed them, watch movies, like teach books through movies, right? We're reading this book, but let's watch the movie and let's really talk about the movie and have a conversation about the movie. Now let's have a conversation about the book. Really interested in how different is the book from the movie, right? We would take students to Pennsylvania, to the coal mines and Steamtown, so they could actually see, okay, we live in an urban environment that is completely different than the rest of America. The rest of America lives more like this. Would show them like different neighborhoods outside of New York City and the experiences outside of New York. So build the confidence 9th grade, 10th grade, get you on track.
Okay.
11th grade, let's really start having this conversation about college. College in 9th grade, we visited colleges in 10th grade. 9th grade, we would go to DC. 10th grade, we go to Atlanta. You've seen the campuses. You can see yourself on that campus. You see yourself excelling in that environment. Now let's get the grades to make it happen. So 10th, 11th grade, then 12th grade was all around graduation.
Mm.
Graduation experiences, college now, trying to get you on the college campus. I remember one day, one of my students, she passed a few years ago, Sade Holly and Torian and Terrian Parker, two young people that were twins. They stayed late with me at school on Friday because they wanted to complete their college application. No problem. I got a ton of forever stamps. You guys go ahead and complete your application. I got stuff to type on my computer, and we might have stayed at school till 7, 8 o'clock. Next
Wow.
morning, when I got home, next morning I woke up, mailed off their applications for them, and the students all did well, right? They went to college, did well. So that was the thing there. After kind of those experiences, I got a call from Arthur Vanderveen, who was he was over the Office of Innovation. So this was a new office with New York City Department of Education. And I think it was the fall of 2011 or spring 2011. I applied to be in to be a school in the I zone. And
The innovation zone.
innovation zone, that's right.
Empowerment, innovations. Yeah,
Yeah, we went from empowerment, we were empowerment.
that's right.
I was trying to get us in the innovation zone. And through the conversations we were having about my school's application, Arthur said, "Hey, why don't you come and join us? Like, why don't you be a part of what we're doing?"
Mm.
And so I was like, I love my school, right? I love the kids. And reluctantly, I did it because I said, how can we impact more students with what we're doing? How can we impact students citywide? And so I moved to the Office of Innovation for 2 years, worked with some amazing schools in Far Rockaway, Queens, up near Co-op City in the Bronx, Washington Heights, and here in Lower Manhattan. One of my favorite principals, she's now retired, Jean Rotunda at Westside Collaborative. She kept telling me how much she was learning from me. I'm like, no, I am learning from you. She was just an amazing mind and thinker about how we can do things differently. And from the Office of Innovation, I left DOE in 2013 and I went to work in Charleston, South Carolina. They
Wow.
Race to the Top grant with one of our partners from New York City. Partner asked if I would go and help the work in Charleston. And that was an amazing experience for me, really eye-opening because it was a county district.
Yeah.
If you've ever been down to Charleston, the Board of Ed is here, the slave market is here, right? And so I think I had 26 schools in my portfolio in Charleston around personalized learning. So we were at personalized learning, a one-to-one initiative with MacBook Pros and iPads, and really working with Bob Marzano. Dr. Marzano would come in on the weekends and do workshops for us for the week, and then leave over. He and I were at the airport on Fridays. I was coming back up to New York. He was headed to Colorado. Some great conversations there.
I'll bet.
But, the real work was we had these schools downtown, but then I would have to drive an hour to a school, drive through 2 or 3 plantations, get to a school that may have been an elementary school, K-5, with 100 students whose families were migrant workers who were coming in for the harvesting season, or they come in for the planting season. But to look at the disparity between the students who were kind of in this urban setting, downtown Charleston, and then the immediate surrounding area, and then these students who were in the rural area of Charleston County. It was very eye-opening to me on what we need to do, but why we needed to leverage technology. Like, technology could be the equalizer, is the equalizer in ensuring that those students on the other side of the 2 plantations whose families may not speak English at home, those students whose families may not have the money, right, to send them to the best school or to move to a neighborhood to ensure their child gets the best education, we can use technology to bring the best education to those students. And so I didn't stay in Charleston long. They did not embrace Common Core standards or the teacher evaluation rubric. And as part of the Race to the Top grant that we had,
Yeah, that was the thing.
teacher evaluation rubric. And so kind of saw that we were going to, at some point possibly lose that grant, or we wouldn't meet the standards, and integrity is a big thing. So I'm like, okay, let me bail. Went up to Newark, and Cammie Anderson was superintendent
Cammie.
of Newark at the time.
That's
Yeah,
our girl, Cammie.
that's right. Dr. Tiffany Hardrick was assistant superintendent. and went and interviewed with Dr. Hardrick, who was also a new leader. I was cohort 4. I think she was cohort 5.
Gotcha.
Interviewed with her and joined her team. And we just did some amazing, amazing work with some very difficult schools in Newark in an attempt to really improve the quality of education for students.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really wanted students to have a great experience in education, to really appreciate school, to love school. And it was, we had a tough portfolio of schools,
Yeah.
but we worked it. Tiffany transitioned back home to Arkansas, Forest City, Arkansas. And so Cammie asked if I would take over as assistant superintendent. And I think we did, kind of a whirlwind of amazing work, and not quick fixes, but
Yeah.
fixes that are embedded in the culture of a school, that over time, they will continue to manifest and grow, and you will see improvement, and you'll see students achieving at a high level. Left Newark in 2015. And at the time, 2015, my father had MS, muscular sclerosis.
Oh.
And it was just progressing. He had come to visit, and it was just progressing. It was going really, if you know MS, it's like that. Like, it goes fast.
Yeah.
So, just stepped away from everything. My father was in Ohio at the time, he and my mom, and I was just going back and forth, make sure things were good there, doing some consulting on the side. After my father passed in December of 2015, it's like, okay, let's get back to it. Let's pick up where we left off. So I went to work for Modern Teacher with Sean Smith. Sean Smith was one of Arnie Duncan's deputies when Arnie was in Chicago. Sean had this idea of digital convergence and going around the country, supporting districts with transitioning from these traditional pen and paper models to a digital convergence model. And there was a, book and framework that we use to facilitate this transition, a lot of, strategies and structures. We will support superintendents, really working with district leadership to put these things in place. From Modern Teacher, I went to work Discovery Education.
Sure.
I went to work for Discovery Education and traveled the Mid-Atlantic regions.
Wow.
Working on strategy with district leaders, ensuring, we got the right people in for professional development. We had the right resources for them. They were like, oh, do you want to do sales? I was like, not at all. Because I don't believe as a district leader, you should purchase something you don't need. So I'm going to be worst salesman. I would never be able to sell anything, because I'd be like, you really don't need this, right? You know that, right? You're about to spend $250,000 on this. You really could just do X, Y, and Z for $25,000.
Right.
So I would never be a great salesman. I worked Discovery for about 3 years. It was really time. I was flying out maybe 3 days a week. I was at Newark Airport, 5 a.m., 3 days a week.
Everybody's saying hi.
That's right, man. Flying to Ohio, other places, doing the work, getting on the ground, doing the work, catching the last flight out, getting back home. And my kids at the time, my 2 youngest boys are in college now. They're freshmen and sophomore at Howard University. And my mother is in 11th grade. My oldest son is 27. So at the time, the kids were still young.
You must have started having kids at 10 years old. I'm not tracking that they could be in college by now.
I'll tell you, man, God is good,
every day. Yeah.
Say you live a good life, it shows, right?
All right.
And so I just wanted to get on the same schedule as the kids, because, soccer and basketball and cheerleading. And
I remember we caught you at a soccer game recently, right? Remember? About a year and a half ago. Yeah.
Yep. About a year and a half ago. Yeah. I'm always, supporting my kids, and I'm coaching when they were little. And so I just wanted to get back on the same schedule as them. And so my original conversation, I started talking to Chancellor David Banks around joining Eagle Foundation. There were some opportunities at Eagle Foundation. And then Dr. Tammy Pate called me, and Dr. Pate said, Gary, I'm on this team in District 10 in the Bronx, and I'd love for you to come meet my superintendent, because we really need a director of continuous improvement. I know how you work with schools. Can you just come and talk? I know you probably won't be interested in this position, but could you come and talk? She didn't know. I was just trying to get back in DOE, and I wasn't really, looking at salary. I was looking at impact, satisfaction, and enjoyment of the work, ensuring I'm making a difference. And so I met with Dr. Maribel Hulla, who's the superintendent at the time. just had a great conversation, and she looked at my resume and she was like, "You're overqualified for this. You sure you want to do this?" And I was like, "I just want to work with schools."
Yeah.
And I worked with a couple schools that were on the state list. They're no longer on the state list because
Amazing.
there were some really awesome principles that we put in place to run those schools. And Dr. Misha Ross Porter
I've
was,
heard of her.
that's right. That's right. She was superintendent in the Bronx at that time. And I had to present to her, she and Nancy Saffer, her executive director. And they, approached me about taking over a middle school in the Bronx, 1,200 students, huge middle school. I said, no, thank you. I was really happy, like doing what I was doing.
Yeah. And it's almost like a step back a little bit, right? I mean,
Yeah.
superintendent,
Yeah. It's like, okay, like, no, I'm really good just doing this. And I was thinking about like, let me build some consulting work, do some of that, had other ideas. And so I prescribed to this rule of three. Like the third
mm,
time someone asks you something, like
yeah,
you can't say no because
yeah.
you might see something you don't see.
Mm, mm,
And so Misha came a third time and said, I
mm,
keep telling her you don't want to do it. And I said, okay, Maribel, I think I'll do it.
mm.
I said, I think I'll go and do it. And I went to the school. It was the fall before the pandemic hit and just took what I had previously learned. So first thing, I formed the digital convergence team.
Mm,
I said, I found out which teachers were really tech savvy, and we had 1,200 students, maybe 65 to 80 classrooms. Every classroom had a printer.
mm.
Each of those classroom printers required ink and required paper.
Yeah,
A lot of money. I think 12 copy machines.
yeah,
And I was like, okay, we are hemorrhaging money because we're not using Google Classroom, right? Some simple tools
yeah.
we use. And it was great because at the time, the tech coordinator at the school was telling me about, Google Drive and how they use Google Drive. And I was like, I don't want to embarrass you, my man, but I was on the team with Office of Innovation that piloted
Mm,
Drive like 10 years ago. I was like, I get it. I understand. But I put this team together and we started training every teacher on using Google Classroom,
yeah,
how to create lessons that incorporated technology, how they could move a lot of the pen and paper things they were doing to the digital platform. Identify, a lot of times you go into school, there are 10, 15 digital tools people are using that all do the same thing. So students have 10 to 15 different experiences with logins and whatnot. So it's like,
yes,
what are the three that we all like? What are the
yeah,
we can all live with? Let's pare it down to those three. Come up with a grading policy consistent with digital learning because it's different. Academic integrity looks different when you're digital than it does with pencil and paper.
right.
I looked at a lot of those different things, had a lot of stuff in place, started creating tutorial videos that teachers could go to, asynchronous videos at their own pace, study. Then the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, and we had, I think, 2 or 3 days for professional development before we went fully remote, our teachers were ready.
Right.
It was just around putting the finer touches on what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it. Fast forward 3 years later, Mayor Adams, Chancellor Banks, are in leadership positions. They are looking at just new ways to approach the superintendency, really investing superintendents with more accountability and empowering superintendents to manage or to lead their districts, right? We don't
Right.
lead, right? To lead their districts. And so in doing that, I was like, okay, that's something that's really attractive to me. Applied for a couple districts and Chancellor Banks called and said, hey, we don't have anyone from Manhattan High Schools.
Mm,
Would you mind taking it? He was like, you'll still have to interview again and go through the process. And, I always consider myself a servant leader.
mm,
And so when leadership, calls on and says, hey, we really need this. Can you do it? Yes.
mm,
Yes, I'll step up. I'll get it done.
yeah,
How we landed here. And then from there, things just really took off. A lot of the work that we were doing and looking at, it's really that great to great, right?
mm,
You always talk about good to great and how
right.
you move from good to great. It's like, how do you move from great to even greater?
Mm,
And we were looking at some really great schools that we have here in the Manhattan High Schools district and how can we support those school leaders How can we provide the resources that they need? How can we create the conditions that they can improve their schools even more? And I think we're at that point.
It's amazing. I mean, look, I'm gonna pull out a couple of things of what I heard. One, you have a career that goes back and forth between community supports, community-based organizing, and school spaces, right? Which really kind of informs your approach to thinking about how students develop, right? You talked about confident students. You have a career. I was going to ask you about innovation and how you became so innovative, but it seems to be obvious to anybody who's listened to you for the last couple minutes, right? That not only did you sit at the Office of Innovation, but you've always been thinking about solving problems for young people. And that shows in the way that you're approaching leadership now. The other thing I think I pulled out here that's been really interesting to me is the idea of people and policies, right? At every stage of your career, you can name a person who is like, I got you. I see you. I want to elevate you, right? You break the mold, but we're going to make a new mold to elevate this kind of talent. And these policies that are at the same time happening in New York City and different places race at the top that enable people like you to be pushed to the top of the pack, right? And so as I'm just listening to this conversation in terms of how you became Manhattan superintendent of high schools, all these ideas of people and policies and innovation and connection come together in this one space and time in this one person who is Gary Beidleman.
Right. You said a lot, and it is a lot, right? When I talk about the servant leader, being a
Yeah.
servant leader and being gracious,
Yeah.
in understanding, like, I am a student of the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
I remember, when I was in the community organizing world, and Mary Wright Edelman would have these leadership retreats for young leaders around the country to come together at the Haley Farm in Tennessee. And I think I had done maybe two of those when I was younger. And so it's really like thinking about the work of the civil rights movement and what is the current civil rights that we are fighting for students. And that's where the equity conversation comes up.
Yeah.
But I think with equity, we can do more, right? We could do more. It's not just recognizing the diversity, but it's like, once we recognize it, how are we supporting everyone? How are we providing opportunities for everyone? How are we leveling the playing field for everyone? And so I'm a big supporter of ensuring that students just get it, that all students, regardless of race, religion, ethnicity, gender, identification, that we support every student, that we address hatred,
Yeah.
and we ensure that we approach the work with love, we approach the work with empathy, that we understand one another. And I think technology is the lever that allow all of that to happen.
Well, let's take some time on that because you talked about that with Charleston before, right? How technology can support equity. And
Yeah.
I understand that you were one of the leaders for ensuring that AI is supportive and equitable in New York City public schools. So tell me your vision around AI, in New York City public schools, and the role of AI in ensuring equity for our young people.
Yeah. I think AI, on a very small scale, right? A student who doesn't have the person at home, like my dad worked 2 40-hour-a-week jobs. He
Yeah.
would come home from one job, and I might be coming in from practice or something, and we talk for a minute, and then he head to the next job. And then he'd come back home that night, and I might be sitting on the couch watching TV. He'd sit down, we talk for a little bit, and he'd fall asleep.
Yep.
When was there time for him to help me with my homework, right?
Yeah.
There time for me to get support with the work that I was doing at school. I think with AI tools, we can provide students with that resource, that help they may need with completing an assignment, with understanding a complex concept, something as simple as editing their work or checking an essay, checking a math problem. There's a friend of mine, 52 years old, is trying to take, a math class, and he put on social media, he was like, oh my goodness, I'm 52 years old trying to learn math again. What do I do? I hit him up. Hey, dude, check this website, that website. And then when you do a problem, put it in here on this AI tool. This is the prompt you want to use, blah, 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 blah. Hits me back next day. That's amazing. Right? Like, you just saved me. Thank you so much. So imagine that student, sixth grader, seventh grader, eighth grader, that's home alone, right? Trying to figure out how to solve this math problem. Do your solution, snap a picture of it, upload it to an AI tool, put in the prompt. Please provide me feedback on the problem I'm trying to complete. Is it correct? And if not, what steps do I need to take or learn to master this?
Mm-hmm.
You'll get the feedback from the tool. Now incorporate that feedback into the next problem,
Mm-hmm.
next problem, next problem. It's the equalizer.
But Gary, is this going to replace our teachers?
Yeah, definitely not. So Gary Mitre, about 15 years ago, talked about what you can let a computer do. What computer can't do, it can't give the empathy. It can't facilitate learning. It can't teach human relationships and interaction.
Come on.
It can't organize the learning, right? The teacher has to be at the center of everything that's going on. Joe Rose, when he did School of One, an amazing, amazing program
I know that word. Yeah.
on middle school learners with math, but it required adults in the room, right? Adults as the navigators, right? I wouldn't get on the plane if there was no pilot, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I wouldn't go in the classroom if there's no teacher. Like a teacher professionally, the AI tool can identify the need. And I think
Mhm.
that's that next level that we are really leaning into with student data and being able to look at student needs across a classroom.
That's right.
And matching the AI with resources and supports, accommodations, modification, uploading double mobs, teach like a champion. So when the teacher creates a lesson plan, they're using actual research-based instructional strategies,
Okay.
the HMH curriculum, right? But then that teacher knowing who's in the classroom by really using AI to disaggregate the data,
Yeah.
to be able to really do mindful grouping and intentional
Yeah.
grouping in the classroom. Teacher is always necessary and important as our leaders.
I'm thinking about the NAEP data because we were seeing our struggling students fall further behind and our students who are actually doing well continue to do well. And that gap actually increased. And one of the things I've been looking at in terms of the use of AI is that motivation really does matter. And I'm just going back to your point, this idea that you talked about in your career, somebody saw you and somebody said, you're worth it. And then you did that for your kids. You're worth it. I see you. Now, the interaction can come through AI, informational transfer, but that context of like, I see you, you're worth it, stay motivated. I think that can't be replaced by any algorithm.
I agree with you 100%. And, to your point, I think what our teacher preparation programs are lacking is that coaching piece. I spent a lot of my professional career also as a coach. And so I bring that coaching stance into the classroom, right? I am your biggest cheerleader. I'm going to motivate you. Failure is not an option. We control two things, our attitude and our effort, right?
Come on.
Right. Like those are things that are in our control.
Yeah.
We need to invest every teacher with that knowledge, with that skill set, with that ability to coach a student
Hmm.
to their peak performance.
That's right.
I was coaching one of my son's games once, and a referee came up to me and he said, man, he's like, like referee all over the state. And I see you guys a lot. He said, you think you Phil Jackson? I said, why do you say that? He said, you don't yell at the kids, you motivate them. He said, I see the language you use, talking about putting them in position to be successful. He was like, other coaches are out here yelling, cursing, screaming at kids.
Mhm.
Like, that's not what you're doing. I think it was a similar experience in the classroom. I remember Mr. Mickens. So Mr. Mickens was famous for always being in the hall,
Okay.
never in his office. He would have a chair, a student desk, a shopping cart with everything he had to do, like in random hallways in the building. And he used to set up outside my classroom because my classroom was always noisy. And Mick was trying to figure out what was going on. I needed students talking to each other.
Let's go.
I needed student to student discussion. I came up, Dr. Carolyn Blue was my first principal, and she always talked about cooperative learning. So I came up believing cooperative learning is how you teach. I was a first year teacher when I was with her. So cooperative learning. So I had all these systems and structures for students to engage in conversations with one another. Before I knew what a Socratic seminar was, putting students in a circle, let's debate, let's argue about this book. And this is what I would always tell other teachers. They were like, well, my students can't do that. I was like, ask them who their favorite basketball player is. And they're going to tell you.
You know what?
Kobe Bryant.
You and I, we have this exact same kind of sense because I always said, I want my students to talk like people debate LeBron James and MJ. Like people bringing stats, years, the defensive output. I'm like, well, I know you guys have this
Yeah.
in you. You just, when it comes to MJ and LeBron, we want to bring all the data. When it comes to other
Right.
things, we just want to put out opinions.
You just want to put, and so when I would tell them this, they would just look, and I was like, just ask the kid and just say, they're going to say Kobe. I was like, you just say Michael Jordan.
That's
All
right.
you have to say is Michael Jordan won 6 rings. And the kid will give you all the evidence why they believe Kobe.
I have seen it happen in my whole life. Yes.
Why can't they do that in the classroom? Right? Why can't you say this character is the protagonist, or this was imagery, or this is evidence of it, and then let me provide my evidence? I was like, it's just our job to show them how to transfer that barbershop argumentative thinking that they have. Most kids go to some sort of church to take that, what they learn with the preacher saying God is good, and then he gives you all the reasons why God is good. How do we bring that into the classroom? That used to be my thing with boys of color. Always just use a basketball analogy. And I was like, most of these young men, they go to church with the parent, or at least the grandmother takes them to church a couple times a year. I was like, these are things that we do culturally in the Black church. So when you're educating your Black boys, this will be familiar to them. And when you show up this way in this other space, the classroom, now the classroom is comfortable, familiar. It's like going to church with grandma. It's like being at the barbershop with my uncle. Like when my dad took me to the barbershop, it just becomes familiar. It's like talking to my cousin.
Yes.
I'm familiar to them. And that's why the adult can never be removed from the classroom. That's why the teacher is super essential, regardless of what we're doing with AI. And we are doing some amazing things, and we are moving so fast with AI.
Yes.
So I'm a Google Innovation Education Fellow.
I saw that. Yes.
Working since this past July with a cohort from around the country, Dr. Davenport, Superintendent District 5, shout out to Dr. Davenport. And we've been working with folks from around the country on AI. And so when we go to Chicago, we meet at one of the Google facilities in Chicago, and we talk with folks from California, folks from Michigan, folks from Utah, folks from Kentucky. And we have these conversations around AI. We thought we were behind. As we're having these conversations with other folks, we're like, oh my goodness, we're so much ahead. And this is how we're ahead. We've engaged our community. We've engaged students. We've engaged teachers. We've engaged school leaders. We've engaged New York City Public Schools leadership. We've engaged our family leaders and parent leaders in conversations around how we can use generative artificial intelligence in ethical ways, right? In realistic ways.
I want to imagine, Gary, you're like your own innovation zone now. I want to pull this full circle, right? Like from leading a school that joined an innovation zone to being the innovation zone for New York City Public School high schools.
I was talking to someone, I introduced them to a business term, organizational ambidexterity. And so I was at a session, I think it was a session with Google in July, and they pointed to, it was in the pre-work or something, organizational ambidexterity. So I looked it up in Harvard Business Review and other places. And how can we be Netflix, not Blockbuster?
Always.
Right?
Yeah.
If Blockbuster had just made that pivot to, you don't have to come to our brick and mortar.
They never believed.
To you.
They never believed. Yeah, it's a classic case study.
And when mailing it to you isn't enough, we're going to give you an online platform where you can just pull it up from home. Netflix made that pivot.
They did.
Blockbuster was resistant. So now there's one Blockbuster, I think it's like in either Alaska or Oregon. And Netflix innovated even more, where they're like, we're not going to purchase your content. We're going to create our own.
Yeah.
There's so much content on, and they almost took a Moneyball approach. So I also believe, I'm a strong believer in Moneyball. They took a Moneyball approach. We're going to put 1,000 different original Netflix series, movies, everything on our platform. You're going to like at least one of them each month.
Yeah.
You're going to tune into at least one.
Yeah.
They were so innovative in their approach. Blockbuster, even as a business model in terms of the finance side of it, we have to contract with these big movie studios in order to get their blockbuster films and license it, blah, blah, takes money. Netflix says, you know what? We're just going to create our own. We're just going to do it ourselves. And we're going to put so much out there. it's going to appeal to someone like it. So thinking as a school district, right? Thinking as a district, how do we practice organizational ambidexterity? How do we continue the great work that we're doing with our students? I think our AP our advanced placement exam scores through College Board are exceeding the national average right now for Manhattan High Schools district.
Okay.
So we've excelled in that area. But in focusing on generative AI, we didn't take our eye off of the need for students to take advanced placement exams, right? We didn't take our eye off the need for conversations around college. We didn't take our eye off the need for organizing bus trips to SUNY campuses, right? In partnership with Dr. John King.
One of my friends. Yeah, good
right?
man.
Like we didn't take our eyes off of implementation of illustrative math in classrooms that promotes student-to-student discussion, right? We didn't take our eye off of implementing an English curriculum, standardized research-based English curriculum where students can see themselves in what they were doing. We didn't take our eyes off of that as we moved forward with AI. We created these parallel tracks and ensured that we have our Principals Collaborative Working Group that's focused on AI. Have our AI teacher fellows where a teacher from every school comes together each month with my district team. And we look at solutions to problems in your school using the AI tool in partnership with Jason Green from Your Way and Learning Innovation Catalyst. Like we are working with them in partnership. We're looking at our student advisory group on AI. We're putting together our AI summits, bring leaders together. On Monday, we brought about 300 folks from schools together to meet. We have our AI implementation teams at each school, which is a cross-functional team at the school exploring how they could better incorporate AI. We brought those teams together on Monday with Google, Danita Morgan from Google, and we looked at new Google products. We looked at Gemini. We looked at Gems. We looked at Notebook LM. And how can we leverage these tools to really, I always say personalized learning, but I cannot say that because personalized is like loaded now. It's kind of cliche. So how do we take these tools and leverage them and use them to make it easier for us to teach and for students to learn? Years ago, when I was a high school principal in Brooklyn, I took my team to a retreat in Tarrytown and Tony Wagner was presenting.
Okay.
And he was talking about rigor. And one of my teachers leaned over and she said, Dr. Linnell Campbell, she was a science teacher at the time. Now she's the MD. She leaned over and she said, Beidleman, he keeps saying rigor, but he doesn't tell us what it is. And so as a staff, we agreed we wouldn't use buzzwords the entire school year. We would actually say what we mean.
Right.
Oh, I try not to say personalized learning anymore. I try to say, let's provide instruction that meets the student where they are and is reflective of that student's interest, identity, skill level, and needs. And I think AI does that for us, or it assists in teachers having the capacity to do that because now you're not hunkered down with this other work. It's similar to me as an almost empty nester with all my boys out of the house in another state. No more basketball games to go to or soccer games to go to. No more basketball games to coach in the spring and in the summer. No more pickups and drop-offs from practices. I find myself not knowing what to do with this extra time. Our teachers, once they effectively incorporate AI into their workflow, they will similarly be faced with the challenge of what do I do with this extra time? What do I do? Now I can have conferences with individual students. I can really look at, okay, what does this student need versus this student? I can really look at research-based instructional strategies and dig deep and really think about what is the best fit for this classroom? What is the best fit for this individual student? Oh, you're having a bad week. You're having a challenge today. Come on, come up to my desk. Let's take some time. Let's talk about this. Right? Let me make sure
the social emotional space.
Social emotional space. Let me write in time, right? To check in with individual students. I have this extra time on my hand. What am I going to do with it?
Right.
Call David Adams, call Urban Assembly. They have a menu of things that you can do with it. You can have advisory inside of class. Hey, right? This new concept of, hey, We have school-wide advisory. Why don't they have classroom advisory?
Mhm.
These 4 students have a similar challenge that they're dealing with. Let me meet with them for 15 minutes every week during class while everyone else is focused on this. Let me meet with this group of students for 15 minutes. This group, right? There are things that we can do with this extra time that we're going to have that will enhance, improve teaching and learning and really accelerate every student and put every student on a path or a track, a similar track for success.
Mhm. Well, Gary, this show is called Innovations in Education, man, and you really personify. I really mean this. What it means to bring energy and ideas into the public education sector. Now, we started off with this conversation of how did you get to be the superintendent of high schools in Manhattan? And then we pulled the lever back and we thought about like what is the future of teaching and learning? What is the role of AI in that future? And how are you making that future happen today across your 100 high schools in Manhattan? And I got to say, I'm inspired by your work. So I brought you on the show. I appreciate your energy. And you got a partner in the Urban Assembly as we think about what we can do to support learners, but also teachers, especially when we're working with AI.
So I think the future of education, it's really going to be around personalization of learning, opportunities for students to learn their own pace, in their own time, what they need in order to be successful, aligned to their interests, their needs, their current capacities and skill sets. I
Mhm.
believe that teachers are always necessary as facilitators of learning and the expert in the room that
Mhm.
guide students in the right direction and bring that expert knowledge to fold. I think our school leaders are key in leading the initiative, identifying the resources that teachers need that will really impact teaching and learning in the classroom and creating the conditions for success, for teachers to be successful, for students to be successful. In terms of myself, what I see for me, man, I'm looking to, I always talk about like there's a problem somewhere. And our
Mhm.
job as leaders is to go find that problem and solve it. So I'm continuing to really scour the borough of Manhattan and where are there inefficiencies, where are there inequities, where are there opportunities for us to be better as leaders, as educators, as students, as parents, right? So where are there opportunities for us to be better and to lean into those opportunities and really take an inquiry stance and to understand these traditional problems that we have and then to bring some innovative thinking to come up with some new solutions.
Well, Gary, we're very excited about your leadership. I'm very excited about your leadership. I thank you for your thoughts, your passion on behalf of our young people here in New York City. And we appreciate the next steps that you're going to be taking in order to make this innovation work at scale.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Appreciate you, brother.
Thanks for listening to our latest episode of Innovations in Education, where we bring education leaders who have made things work in the education sector. If you like this episode, please subscribe so that you can hear more great content around innovations in education. I've been your host, David Adams, and have a great day.